Welcome F11 members to issue 18's video tutorial, The Fundamentals of Post-Production Continued. Elsewhere in this issue you'll hopefully have already read the piece on seeing the light and in particular the intangibles of working with moonlight. And also there's a new series starting this month called How It's Done, and it's the background behind this shoot, which I shot last night, just some 12 hours ago, of the super moonrise over the Jurassic coast. And you can read all about how I plan to be in the right place at the right time, the logistics of that shoot, and how it all came together. So now let's work through the post-production on these images, or this one picture. And what I've got is two raw conversions of the same exposure, which I've processed in Lightroom. And if you look at these initially, there's very little difference between them. I've put a little touch of contrast in to the image. I've sharpened it apart in Lightroom. Apart from that, not much difference. This one is a touch darker than this one. And this one, you can see on the sky, I've put a touch of a grad in on the sky in Lightroom there. It's darkened down the sky. Now, you can, of course, adjust areas in Lightroom, darken and lighten areas in Lightroom using the adjustment brush, but I find it a relatively crude tool. So what I want to show you is how I normally work with a picture like this. And you'll be asking myself, well, why have I bothered to make these two different exposures, two different raw conversions? Just by using layers, it gives me more flexibility to selectively control the image. So what I'm first going to do is I'm going to look at the this picture here, and what I want is the sort of top half to third of the frame is what I want from this image, whereas in this picture here I want the sea, most of the sea, and the landscape in the foreground. So I'm going to use this technique I've shown you before. I'll just bring the tools palette in here so you can see it. I'm going to select that lasso tool there and just very roughly just reduce this picture down a touch, and that one, it's a little bit crowded on the desktop. I have to reduce resolution for these video tutorials from my full screen resolution, which makes things a little bit difficult, but we'll get there. So I'm just going to roughly take a selection based on something like that. Okay, and then I'm now going to go image adjustment, select, modify feather, and it asks me my feather radius. I want a pretty broad radius because I want that to appear as a very gradual transition, so I've selected a feather radius of okay there. Just one thing I should mention, by the way, if I just show you something here, come down here to actions, and if I bring these over here, you'll see these are all actions that these are things that I do often, and selecting and make a feathered edge to that is something I do often. So I've made these actions so I can select those. It just speeds the whole process up. In a future tutorial I'll show you how to do actions, but for now let's just stick with that selection. All I'm going to do now, select the move tool and then just drag this one into place on that image, fine tune the positioning of it. I'm now finished with this image here, so I can actually close it down, and I'm left with this picture here. And if I show you the layers palette here, I've got two layers. I remember when I first started working with Photoshop, I felt this whole concept of layers was totally baffling, but the more you use it, the more you get your head around it. and actually it is so flexible to be able to use layers. So what I have is the slightly darker layer on top of the brighter layer underneath, and if I click that eye on and off, it shows you the layer active or hidden. Okay, so now what I want to do is start fine-tuning the picture. So the first thing I'm going to do is select the background, and I go Image Adjustments, Curves, and that's showing me the histogram for the whole of the background layer. But of course some of that background layer is hidden behind that darker top layer. So I'm going to click that box here, Show Clipping, and I'm now just going to move the highlights slider in. I can go bring the brightest point all the way in before any clipping starts to occur. There is clipping occurring to the layer, but it's hidden by that darker top layer, and that's what makes this way of working so flexible actually. Okay, now if I just unclick that and then go preview, and it's showing me the effect of doing that. It's just brightening up the bottom 2/3 of the image a touch, because that selection across the top layer, if I just go OK to that, if I hide the background layer, because this selection here is so gradual, you're not seeing any kind of horrid hard edge there, and that's gone some way to just giving the picture a bit more oomph, a bit more impact. Now the next thing I want to do is actually look at the top layer there, and if I click that on and off, that top layer is just affecting the top of the arch there. Now if I hide the background, what I could do, if I could say I'm not too happy about that, and I could go to the eraser tool here and then right click that, and it asks me what size brush I want. I want something quite big, about there, with a pretty soft edge. I usually go somewhere around the middle there, and then opacity up here I'm going to tail it right down to about 10%, and now I'm just going to erase away some of that top layer because it's darkening down the top of the door there a touch, which ultimately this is always subjective, but if I just go back on the history tool to show you what I've done there, that's it, and that's it without. Very subtle, just brightening that top of the arch there. But that's what this game is all about, subtlety. So the next thing I'm going to do is look at the top layer and ask myself, is the darkness and contrast of that top layer what I want? Pretty much, because I adjusted that to the raw image in Lightroom as to how I wanted it. Just going to fine tune it again, going to the curves tool, and I'm just going to darken it down just a touch. What I want is this lovely tone there. That's the moon rising, and you can see it's this beautiful orange light reflecting off the moon and onto the water there, and that's what I really is the key to the whole picture. If I go down, oh sorry, I need my preview tool. If I go too much, you can see it's way over the top, but just a little bit of darkening there I think would be the job. About that. Okay. Right, at this stage I now look at the picture and I think, well, this area down here of this grass in the foreground, I really, at the time when I was shooting it, I decided that I was going to include it. I thought it gave some context. I quite like the sort of feathery feel. It's a relatively long exposure there, something like 10-15 seconds, and the grass is swaying in the breeze there. I just want to select the background layer, and again using the lasso tool I'm just going to select this area of grass here, and I'm going to use my actions here. Okay, where have I put them? Over here. Bring them back, and I just select feather 150 and press the play button, and that's done that selection. You see how actions can be so useful in speeding up the way you work. Now I go again, image adjustments, curves. This is, you know, such a common thing that I do with my post-production, is just selecting areas, working with layers, and just fine-tuning the brightness and the contrast of those areas. Now if I click on show clipping, and if I bring this slider in, it will show me at what stage clipping starts to appear. Now I've gone way too far there, and you can see this blue starting to appear here. That's telling me I'm clipping highlights. Also on this side of the feather I'm losing information there, and that's confirmed to me by looking at the histogram here. I'm eating into the shoulder of the histogram, so I don't want to go too far. Also unclip that and just see what I'm doing here. I'm just a bit nervous about losing some of the information here in this surf, so I'm not going to go too far. Does make quite a difference though to the image. It just lightens up, gives that foreground more interest. I'm going to say OK to that. Select, deselect, and at this stage really, as always, subtlety is the key. I'm pretty happy with that picture, but there are a couple of things that need attention. If I just zoom in here, we had a ship out there in the channel passing by, and you can see it here streaking through the frame. I find that distracting, so I'm just going to go in and take that out, and the way I'm going to do that is using the healing brush here. And basically again, you adjust the size of your brush to suit, dependent on the size of what you're trying to take out. Again, I generally tend to work with a fairly soft edge, around about medium hardness. It's a very clever tool, this, very clever. Particularly here in CS6 they've brought in content aware healing brush as well. So I'm just going to move that across the area. Oh, I can't do that yet because I still have an image that is 2 layers. So before I do that, I'm going to just flatten the image. And now I come and with my healing brush, just, it's like magic, isn't it? Incredible, really. And then down here on a beach we had someone here. You can see this guy. I think he'd had quite a hard evening actually. He was crashed out down on the beach. I could leave him in as part of the interest, but actually I find him distracting, so he's history. If only life were so simple, you could just remove the bits that you didn't want so easily with a healing brush. Anyways, he's gone. Look at that, it's just such an incredible tool, that, the healing brush. What I'm going to do when I'm finished with this picture is hand it over to Wendy, who will also take out these little bits of plastic and rubbish and check the picture at 100%. Here you can see there's my magnification. She will check the picture for any other defects or impurities. You can just start to see stars coming through here. What made this shoot special was that the moonrise was at the time when there was still some beautiful twilight left in the sky, and that's what made it such a fortuitous situation. Plus it was a full moon and it was a supermoon, so you can read all about that in the how to do it section. So now I'm finished with that picture. What I do is go image mode, convert it to 8-bit, and now I will save that, and that becomes, once it's been dust busted by Wendy, that becomes our master image. So that was that. Pretty simple, straightforward shoot, not much to do in post-production, but again just fine-tuning to really bring out the best in the picture. Okay, in the other part of our fundamentals of post-production video tutorial this month, we're going to be looking at how to use the adjustment brush in Lightroom to do the same kind of effects. For those of you who want to do it all in Lightroom, that may not have Photoshop or just want to use the one software. Okay, thanks very much. We'll see you again.